Hi, this is Anthony Parent of IRSMedic, and we have a follow-up guest, a great guest we had on a couple years ago, and we're trying to see how she is doing. Kathleen Dameron is with us, and as is Keith Redmond and John RIchardson. And Keith and Kathleen go back a while, and so Keith really knows her story a while. So I'm going to hand it over to him to sort of explain the situation for our viewers and what's exactly going on overseas and one business owner's experience. Kathleen has a business in France and is living there as a U.S. person. So with that, Keith, why don't you explain to us exactly what's going on here?
Sure. No, thank you, Anthony. Well, I thought it would be a good idea to have Kathleen back on. It's been about a year, and she is an American overseas businesswoman living in Paris. And just to recap from last year, there was a big
It was 2 years
question.
of Keith. Keith, it was 2 years ago.
Was it two
It
years
was
ago?
December. Yep, it was December. Yep. Yeah, yeah.
Boy, does time fly.
Yeah,
Well,
huh?
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so all the better. So it was 2 years ago, and I know at the time there was this big question Kathleen had in regards to what is she going to do with her business, contemplating renouncing or not renouncing, and where things. And I thought it would be a good chance to talk about where things are and where things are not over these past 2 years vis-a-vis her situation. So I'd like to start out with that. Just give the virtual floor over to Kathleen to talk about where she is and what she's contemplating.
So it's good to say, wow, what was I thinking about 2 years ago and where did I land now? I'm going to start with the whole idea of, oh, let's renounce. It was impossible to renounce. You need to
Yeah,
know
right.
that. They closed American embassies. You couldn't do it. So, in the story.
That's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
So, next thing. They, I'm going to rephrase that because I don't want to sound aggressive. The United States government had a number of policies that make it impossible to live if you have a business overseas. I love the guilt tax. At least they're honest. You should feel guilty because you're over there. We will make you feel guilty.
Well, and I would say this on that they really bent over backwards to try to make that work because it stands for Global Intangible Low Tax Income, which doesn't make any sense of what it is. And so, yeah, they were really, really specific with that. I think you're absolutely right. They wanted me to make you feel guilty.
Yes. And there's no way around it. So I closed my company. I have closed my French company. I liquidated everything. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, if you can't do it, you can't do it. I mean, there's no point being a business if you can't make money. And if you make any money, it's theirs. If you want to go into retirement, it's theirs. So, hey, y'all win. Hands up.
Oh my
With it in
goodness.
cards, you fold your hand and all that sort of stuff.
So to rephrase, so you would say without a doubt, the US income tax code forced you to liquidate your business.
It did not force me to liquidate my business. I did not want to work and not make money.
Okay.
I mean, I could have
Yeah.
kept working and giving them the money. I mean, that was the
Yeah.
choice I had. I had to do something with my time.
Hmm.
But if my objective is to make money for me, then it was no longer a viable option.
But don't you feel, as a patriotic American, that your obligation is to country first?
As a patriotic American, that
Your obligation is to the United States first. Shouldn't your priority be to
Right.
generate revenue for the United States? I mean, why?
unfortunately, I'm one of these elitist people who was used to luxuries in life, living indoors and having regular meals. So
Yeah, living that extreme lifestyle. I like so many of our clients. Really, our clients working hard around the globe and living like normal people are treated like Fortune 500 companies. Who, by the
no,
way,
no,
and
no.
this
If you're a Fortune 500 company, you don't have to pay a tax. If you're a GAFA, you don't have to pay tax in a European country, and you don't have to pay tax in the United States. If you're a GAFA, nobody makes you pay. I mean, it's outrageous.
Well, I actually have one more thing to explain to you too, and this is what I was talking to one of my old attorneys who's working at a new firm, and he has, instead of the individuals that we tend to have, people who own their own businesses, he's now working for the larger corporations, and so he's taking his 5471 knowledge. Now he's applying it to the larger corporations. Well, he told me the most interesting thing. He says, you know what they do when you don't have a 5471? They say, oh, hey, could you file that? We'll give you a bunch of time to get a 5471. And in fact, the IRS treats large corporations on the penalties completely different and rather reasonably. What the IRS saves their anger for and all their viciousness for is the individual who owns a controlled foreign corporation, or a few people. If you have if you are a publicly traded company, if you're a large corporation, you're fine with your 5471s. If there's a mistake, they'll bring it to your attention and give you plenty of time to correct it before coming down with penalties. Whereas, completely different story when they're dealing with individuals. So it's even worse than even in the administrations. It's terrible.
It's interesting because you put it that way, Anthony. I wonder if the view of the U.S. government isn't that U.S. corporations should be treated as sort of armies to go out and conquer the world and bring back profits for the United States, but an individual like Kathleen probably. I've got to ask you this, Kathleen. When you moved from the United States, was it in fact, now be honest, was it in fact to avoid U.S. taxation?
I was 18 years old when I moved abroad.
After thinking ahead.
You looked at your,
At 18 years old, I was really backwards. I wasn't thinking about taxes at all. I was thinking about living abroad. I was trying to discover the world, curiosity, learning French. No.
I remember 2 years ago, you had this great phrase, fraud from abroad.
Yep.
So can I infer from that when you were 18, your move to outside the United States was in no way, shape, or form motivated by the thought of fraud from abroad?
When I was 18 years old, let me tell you that taxes was really not on my list. You know what 18-year-old women think about? And it's not Uncle Sam.
Even American 18-year-olds don't think about their. Even American 18-year-olds don't think about Uncle Sam.
And and I came abroad and I went to university here. I wasn't even working. I was going to university. So no, plans to fraud, plans to have my income somewhere else. No, that was really, really, really not what I was into.
But you woke up one day later and realized that you were in the world of fraud from abroad. Is that right?
I woke up probably about 40 years later to discover that I needed to have, I needed to be declaring my income taxes in the United States, even though I had no income in the United States, even though I had no property in the United States. I do have a mother, brother, sister, uncles, aunts, cousins in the United States. And so I was relatively attached to the country because most of the people I love are living in the United States.
Don't you think that's a justification for taxation? If you love an American, you should pay taxes to America?
Well, I think that if I work in the United States and I make money in the United States, I will pay taxes in the United States. But if I'm not working in the United States, don't you think you should pay taxes to the country you're living in? I mean, that would seem fair.
Why?
I mean, you pay.
Who you asked that question to?
Well, there's not a whole lot of people to ask that question to. And I remember when FATCA came in, and this is rude language, and the American government had found a way that they were going to force the banks to do the work of enforcing the legislation because they had the international banks by the short and curlies. And if you don't do A for us, which is if you don't report all Americans to us, then we will seize your assets in the United States. Based on what? Based on what? This is blackmail. I mean, it's extortion. And so You know, the Russians didn't say yes and the Chinese didn't say yes, but everybody else didn't have an army to defend themselves against it. And so all of a sudden, I have my French bank saying to me, you should do this. But more than that, I've been here a long time, so I have a number of bank accounts, which makes my FATCA a mess and really painful. But I cannot open a new bank account in France. The minute it gets to the point of where you were born, and it says born in the United States, the online thing goes, cut you down, shuts it off, and says you will receive an email, and you get one of these nice form emails that says that the bank's policy is not to open bank accounts for Americans. Recently, there's some new online banks that I could go to, but you can't even open a new bank account here when you were born in the United States. And that's before they ask you if you've got a green card. So the United States has found a way to make having a bank account painful for me. And I live in France where it's easy. I know in Germany you have women who find themselves married to a German and can have no bank account and no credit card, which is really uncomfortable.
Would you say that these policies discriminate particularly against American women?
They discriminate very much against American women who would want to have a foreign husband, or as they call them, an alien husband.
Well, maybe American women, maybe the policy is to discourage American women from marrying aliens. Could that be it, do you think?
They don't want us to marry aliens. And but they don't want us to marry aliens. And it's really a very patriarchal thing, because basically if you are the person who is not the primary earner of income, because if you're the primary earner of income and they ask you to declare your bank accounts and all of that, you can accept it. But if you, like I was married to a Frenchman, we'd only been married for 23 years, so we didn't get married to avoid any kind of taxing.
You weren't.
You have to tell your spouse that, by the way, dear, I need to all of the bank accounts because I need to declare them to the Americans, and they also want to know the name and address of your employer. And you can have responses that are not favorable towards you, not favorable towards the Americans. My French husband basically said the United States was a dictatorship and that they had no right to his body. That would be it.
Yeah.
And I know that a number of couples have had major issues and problems, and sometimes it's easier to be divorced. And you have women in Germany where if the American is on the bank account for the mortgage to your house, you're going to have a problem because the German banks didn't want to deal with all the constraints of the Americans. Yeah, they made people's personal lives difficult. They got involved in your couple life. And I'm like, why? Why? What is it you have against human beings who just happen to be American having a life outside the United States?
It's having the life outside the United
States. That's the problem.
Yeah. But my life has recently become extraordinarily Kafkaesque because I decided that I still needed to work and, make some money. And so I was going to open a US company, and I wanted to have a US bank account. Now you think this is easy, right? I'm a US citizen. And I finally, after all these years, I have not had a company, a house. I've had zilch in the United States, zilch since I was 18 years old. Just a minute. Can I give you the phone? It's Napata. Sorry. And I've had zilch in the United States. So I decided to go the route of actually having a US company and having a US bank account. Well, guess what? As a US citizen, I cannot open a US bank account because I don't have a US address. Now, they will come and tax me in France, make me fill in fact up the wahoo. I was online to fill in a Bank of America account, Bank of America, right? And it's a Bank of America account for a company, and it's an international account. And there's a form, you get all the way to the end, and it says, do you declare FATCA? And if you say yes, we're terribly sorry. And the whole system shut down, and then you get this little form letter back. So if you declare FATCA and you want to go to this reputable bank called Bank of America, as a US citizen with a valid US passport, you can't do it because you declare FATCA. I'm like, excuse me, I mean, like, shit. I can't do it here and I can't do it there. I have sinned it, therefore, I will pay.
Right. I mean, it's just it's like taking away your personal power.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it's about. It's dehumanizing. And that, look, marriage is, every marriage is different, right? And here it is, and the relationships are different. And you're throwing everyone together into this one pool where, every husband is going to be cool sharing all his personal information with the United States government, or even, it works either way. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, some of them,
as if your spouse, I can't, you know what? I love you so much and I have no questions about this whatsoever. I'm so glad you asked me this question for my bank accounts. That's not weird at all. So let me just give you all this information for whoever you're going to send it to. And you know what? I won't even go look online where I'll find that the Commissioner of Internal Revenue says all that FATCA data that they collect, they don't do anything with.
Right.
And I mean, this is such a hard, this is, and again, and we always go back to, and what does the tax do, right? France has high taxes, and there's not a lot of taxes that you owe. Have you owed in the years that you filed? Oh, you have owed.
Yes.
Yeah, she has.
Several
Kathleen
thousand
Oh, that's
dollars.
right. That's
Several
right.
$1,000
Now I
I
remember.
have had to pay. Excuse me. Because it's a lie when they say that France is really, really high and the United States is not. That's one of the lies Americans like to believe in. And then you add the fact that the US government does not accept a pension plan outside the United States. So my equivalent of 401k, my pension plan in France does not qualify as a pension plan. So they're going to tax me on my pension plan. So you wind up owing them money for having a pension plan. Now, there are a whole number of things and ways that they've done, because in the beginning they told me, don't worry, you'll never have to pay it. And then I get hit with these bills. And I'll never forget, I got hit with the bill for the pension plan, and it said, yes, because everything that has to do with stocks, et cetera, that's different. And you have to pay that money even if you don't owe any money in income. So even if I had put it in with my income, I would have been under the ceiling. Because it was money from a stock account, I had to pay. And then I did really crazy things. Like I actually have a piece of property with an alien.
What?
I have a piece of property with an alien.
Oh my.
Jesus.
Wow. How could you do such a thing?
And so
I mean,
and so you have to declare, and that any money that is earned from that property that you own with the alien is in a totally different plot. So it costs a lot of money just to do the income tax on it. But in fact, that property that I own with the alien is not for sale. It's sort of like kind of a place where you would like to live. But that I live with an alien, so.
God.
Yeah.
It sounds scary.
Yeah. That's why it is a myth that these US tax treaties with other countries like France stops double taxation. It's a myth.
Total.
No, tax taxation. It's the exact opposite. They reinforce double taxation.
Yeah.
Saving clause.
Yeah, we covered that topic. Was that last week? We covered the savings topics.
It was last week. Yes.
And really, the sum is that word savings clause makes every treaty basically not worth too much. So that's really so you could take a look at that. Now, so Kathleen, I have a question for you here. What do you think should be done about all of this?
I mean, I can come back to some of the things that I said 2 years ago. All you have to do is say in the law that if you have bank accounts in the country that you live in,
Mm-hmm.
excluded from all of this FATCA and FBARs and all of that sort of stuff, because it's the country you live in. Easy. It would be easy to say that a pension plan, if it is recognized as a pension plan in the country that you live in, it is considered a pension plan by the American government. Easy. I mean, those two little things, so simple.
Kathleen, have you considered the possibility that foreign countries might actually, and companies might be creating pension plans for the sole purpose of helping Americans avoid taxation? I mean, have you considered that?
As I live in France, where people
foreign governments and setting these things up through their legislation might in fact be to deprive U.S. Treasury of revenue to which they are justly entitled. Have you considered it?
I haven't considered it because I live in France.
It's a whole pension industry, John.
That demonstrates regularly around everything that has to do with pensions. You mentioned pension and they go out on strike. So they're much more concerned about the strikes in Paris.
I mean, are you seriously saying, Kathleen? I mean, this is an incredibly novel concept that social and economic activity outside the United States might actually not be motivated by anything to do with U.S. taxation. I mean, are you making that claim seriously?
I know it's really difficult to believe, but there are French people who are much more concerned about France, the French way of life, and French demonstrations than anything that happens in the United States. And most French politicians, what they worry about is, if I say this, will I have people out in the street demonstrating tomorrow morning or not? That's their primary concern. I know it's a novel idea.
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, you would have a lot of trouble. I mean, on Wednesday, I listened to the argument in the Bittner Supreme Court, the FBAR case. And, at least some of the judges, I'm getting my ideas today from listening to their questions. I mean, really, this is, the whole idea of things foreign to the United States. I mean, this is very disturbing stuff in America. Very disturbing.
I mean, I can imagine as for some American, it's difficult to imagine that there is a socioeconomic life in other countries.
That's true.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, and I do want to now, Kathleen, you are a Democrat, correct?
Probably.
Okay. So and
so than 2 years.
And in full disclosure, I'm not whatsoever. I don't know, wherever I am, but I'm not. But here's the important thing.
I'm a Democrat who has a lot of sadness for the former Republican Party. The death of the Republican Party, I think, contributed to a lack of any possibility of democracy in the United States.
Okay.
But by that, do you mean by leaving the American public to the Democrats? Is that what you mean?
No, because I think that what has happened to the Republican Party, it has become the cult of a particular individual and is no longer a party that is concerned at all about the United States.
Are you referring to Anthony?
It does fit me as well. It does, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think I have quite the audience. Yeah, and I just think that I think this is a time. So, Kathleen, I would disagree with what you said. I'm not gonna. I don't think that's the point of it, because I think it's more important that let's talk about the things that we have in common. And we were mentioning before, sort of how overworked the IRS is, which is absolutely true for people. And this is something I was working on a case yesterday. I was looking at a reasonable cause letter, and here's the reasonable cause. This is the situation that was presented to me. Somebody was trying to file an amended return for 2020. And the reason why is they missed some income, some foreign income. Like, okay, look, I got to amend this return. I missed some foreign income. Let me take care of this really quickly. Well, the CPA went to the IRS website to say, okay, let me make sure that return is processed. So this return that was filed, paper filed on October 15th of 2021, for the tax year 2020, it hasn't been processed yet. The return hasn't been processed yet. So the question posed to me is, well, what do? Do you just file the return and hope the other one is there when it's amended? Because if you file that amended return without a return being there, you are really creating a problem then that goes on for years. And so my advice is, like, as stupid as it is, I think you got to wait till you see that return processed. Now, they said it was going to be processed by the end of this year. We'll see. And so that then once that's in, the amended return can then be processed. But when will that occur? And that amended return will now not occur for, probably it's a paper file thing. It's probably going to take a year to process that amended return. So now that puts us out at 2024 to file a return that you're trying to fix. And the IRS simply doesn't, look, agents went AWOL, they still AWOL. I mean, the processing times are beyond. And there's so many people waiting for massive refunds over a year. And so I think what we have to acknowledge is that there's actually a limit to the workload a tax agency can do. And my point is this, is we ask the IRS to do more and more and more things that aren't really related to tax. And they're sort of missing their key function, like making sure people get their refunds, because we're in situations, well, why should someone comply with a tax code? They just take your money and they give it back to you eventually. And you're left, they're here, you want your refund? Oh, beg for it. That's what that's what they've made all of us for. So I think this is an issue that transcends Donald Trump. And for a lot of us, he's the reason why we like him, because he's destroying the Republican Party that was hand in hand with the very same people. They did everything, and it was a false choice. It was a false choice we were given, that we're not, because we're led down this road. Because let's just think about this. Donald Trump did pass the 2017 tax reform, and that had a bunch of terrible things in it. And we could, that was Kevin McCarthy's baby, I guess. And Trump absolutely deserved criticism for that. It was a very flawed bill. But what was it in response to? And so what it's in response to is, in over 100 years of Democrats and Republicans acting in collusion to pretend that you actually had a choice. Meanwhile, they both work hand in hand. They want control, no matter if it's Republican or Democrat, whatever. They all want control. And what I see Trump as is the one who's destroying it. And he's destroying that control. And that's why the guns are coming out for him. And we'll disagree about that, and that's okay. But I just want you to understand my perspective on it. That, look, Democrats and Republicans have let the Tax Reform Act of 1986. That was signed into law by President Reagan. That was a piece of garbage. There was so many payoffs to Wall Street in that. Absolutely. And it continues. When you look at it, the tax code exists for one purpose. It's to give power to people in Washington. They make everything taxable. Everything is taxable. Every dollar you make, when you make it, has a silent tax lien on it from the U.S. government. And then what they simply do is like, if you're nice to us, we'll give you favors. We'll give you relief from the tax code if you're nice to us or you're big enough, like large corporations. Large corporations get the relief. The individual, the smallest minority, is one individual. The individual gets the full brunt of it. And this is really what I want to say is, we got to stay united on this one issue, that we have to be focused on, wait a second, the enemy is actually not Donald Trump. The enemy is an entire Washington, D.C. They're all in it together. All those lobbyists. And there's a huge industry. Massive industry built up around this. And those people don't want to go away. They don't have anything else they can do. So these are some of the things that I see as how I've gotten to where I'm at, that we've had complete collusion. It used to be a thing. Republicans were against the income tax. And that was called a Republican of 1913. Then all of a sudden, they see the same money come in. You think they want to give that up? Well, we're getting that kind of money? Oh, they want it. They want it all. And that's really what we're left with. And if you're big enough to fight back, you do okay.
Yeah, and I don't think that the 45th president tried to change any of that. Just change who was getting it. But we don't have to go into that.
Yeah, no, we don't need to go into
that. Because what it comes down to is that for some reason, the United States is one of 2 countries in the world that has this citizen-based taxation.
Right. And Donald Trump did not create that.
And
right, that's been there for years. Yeah.
Donald Trump had been there for years. And all of a sudden, something that had been there for years, but didn't really affect people, then all of a sudden you get FBARs. And the FBARs, if you remember, were we want to stop people from putting money abroad in tax shelters and hiding money from the US government. And to take care of those small number of people, it would have been more effective to count the 200 people or the 2,000 people who had enough money to do that and give every IRS agent 2 of them to follow than to create this huge system that no one can deal. There's so much information that they collect and send in. Any system would explode. If the objective was to avoid tax fraud, it's not people making 100,000 a year who are going to be actively involved in all this tax fraud. So the number of people who are doing it are limited enough. Just have a special force of IRS people who spend their time focusing on them. You would have had something a hell of a lot less expensive and a hell of a lot more effective. So
less damaging for the average person.
And less damaging for the average person. So we're creating a huge law for something that affects a very small number of people.
Yeah, and I would say this before FATCA was passed in 2010 as part of the Hire Act, and before FATCA was passed, the IRS was already overworked, and that was when they had a bit. That's when they actually were up. They at that point they were around 90,000 employees, and they were still overworked. And then so what happened? You had two things happen. IRS people they can't stand it. I mean, a lot of the agents and officers I talk to, they're just like, look, I'm just sticking this out till I get my time in. And, my manager doesn't give me a hard time, so I can get my time in. If he gives me a hard time, I'm out. And that was 2011. And so this was one of my main problems with the FATCA conceit. Okay, because remember, it was passed as it was going to bring in extra money, free money, if we pass FATCA. And here we have it that it doesn't happen. And now the FATCA compliance, as the IRS loses its staff and they go remote and lose a lot of productivity, they're now foisted with the craziest issues. And then they get into this foreign issue, and they don't have the people who can understand it. They don't have the people. I mean, there is a finite amount of people who can understand and do this work. There really is, and we're seeing that. And a lot of people who had great tax professionals around the world, those people aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
And there's a real short. And I mean, this tax season, we are hearing from a lot of our peers, wasn't great for us. We had a lot of problems. It's been a disaster for everybody. It's been a horrible tax year. Yeah. Every little thing that delays you just builds up, and you have returns you have to get to. And you're like, I don't have the time. How's this going to happen? I'm delayed, another delay. Client's delayed, you're delayed. And all these things add up. And then at the end, we're like, oh my Lord, oh boy. And it's been a nightmare. This has been one of the worst seasons for everybody. Really, just industry-wide. Client satisfaction is way down. Don't blame you. A lot of it's not our fault, though. I mean, a lot of it's just like we are just dealing with an ever-expanding IRS that's only accelerating in its expansiveness, it seems like.
So here's my question to put out to the universe and for this podcast. With the genesis of all this is the U.S. linking its citizenship with tax residency, and it needs to be severed. meaning residency-based taxation. What is it going to take, and who's going to do it to stand up, especially Americans overseas, to get this change done? What organizations, what individuals are going to do to get this severed? That is the genesis of the problem.
I could tell you the agency that's going to stop it. You ready for it? It's the IRS. There's no, as I look at the political landscape, there's no one who's going to get rid of the IRS. It's never going to happen. The special interests are way too strong. And you have some of the top, the big four CPA firms. They're lobbying hard to make this as complicated as possible. The whistleblower firms. John and I discussed this on our Bittner podcast. They are the ones who are advocating for non-willful penalties to be imposed the most, which is, well, if they're non-willful, why is that a basis of a whistleblower complaint?
Anthony,
right?
The whole point of the tax code is to give whistleblowers business. Come on, get with the program.
A special amount of people.
Program for whistleblowers.
So the only thing that I can think will bring it down is that all of the things that are causing the IRS to get destroyed, nothing is stopped. All the things that are going into the IRS's ineffectiveness and not even being able to process returns, refunds. Look, for most people, tax day is not a bad day because that's when they get their money back. For people who have to pay, it's a different story. But you're messing with a lot of people who usually, wait a second, I was planning on having that money for Christmas.
Right.
And
but you know what? That's good and fine for people who are living in the United States and they have those issues to deal with. But for people living outside the United States who are tainted with U.S. citizenship, what is the answer there? How are they going to stand up for themselves? Do they need to put the screws to the American overseas organizations, political and non-political organizations? How are they going to get these organizations to put as priority American overseas issues above homeland American issues? It's a completely change in my mindset and behavior and attitude. That's where it needs to come down as well.
Well,
and I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
No,
so
it's not going to happen.
I think that after years, spending years and years on this problem, and it really is years at this point. I think that, and I really hate to say this, and I think it will be somewhat controversial, but I think the problem is mostly Americans abroad who are not willing to unite in terms of a common purpose, get rid of this. And they cause problems for themselves in a couple of ways. The first is this absolutely ridiculous reliance on these political organizations to get change. I mean, this is,
this might be a time for me to share what Keith sent to me here. Let me see if I can get that up here. I didn't get the whole thing here. Let me see where I could find
it. Just the title in itself, Anthony, is really quite disturbing.
Yeah, let me just make sure I get the right window.
No, while you're looking for that, but the other point, the problem is citizenship taxation. Every single problem that people experience is twinning citizenship with tax residency. And as long as Americans abroad focus on their particular problem, whether it's guilty, 3520, bank account, as long as they focus on their particular problem at the expense of the problem, which is citizenship taxation, there's just no way to get the support on the thing. That's the problem. And I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. Okay. People have a duty to take responsibility themselves, and Americans abroad are just not up to it. That's the line. There is not the support.
Right. And I think when I got this the other day, from Democrats abroad, and, certainly Kathleen, your input is welcome on this, is that it says, our personal freedom is on the ballot. Return yours today. Well, whose personal freedom? Homeland Americans, okay, whether you agree or not, their personal freedom. Where do Americans overseas fall into this? What about their personal freedom as a U.S. citizen? They have no personal freedom outside the United States, with the U.S., and I use the term very strongly, terrorizing them consistently. So they get ignored. They get ignored at all. I mean, Kathleen, do you have any thoughts on, because you're living this, on what could be done? Your input is welcome.
I mean, I agree with what John just said. I remember way back when you were still living in Paris regularly, and we went to a meeting with the Republican lawyer who had done Citizens United, and they were
Oh,
talking,
yeah.
and they were
Yes.
talking
Jim
about
Bopp. Jim Bopp is his name. Yes.
the Republicans were about to take over control of the House of Representatives, and it's the House of Representatives that was responsible for taxation and taxation legislation. And stick with us, babes, and we're going to solve the problems of Americans abroad. And da 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 da. And I was there in the room, and I heard what he said and what they were doing and what they could do because they were in control of the House. But what did they do? Nothing.
No, and there's no
Worse,
argument there.
I mean,
but both parties are complicit in this situation.
No, actually,
but excuse me. If
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
So I come back to what John just said. Neither political party has enough interest. We don't elect one of them. Our votes are so diluted. We do not register on their radar other than getting the advantage to coming to Europe to talk to us because they want to be in Europe. And
they want the votes
vacation,
of Americans
right? Oh,
overseas.
it's beautiful, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But also they want votes from Americans overseas every 2 years.
No, they don't care. Most of the time, our votes don't even get counted when the results are declared.
Well, there's such a big push for the overseas vote without acknowledging the problems of Americans overseas.
And I absolutely agree with you as someone who spends time telling everybody to vote and having done bipartisan voter registration, okay? But the fact is, when they declare the results at 8:01 p.m. when California closes, they haven't counted the overseas votes.
Well, I'm not going to get into election counting right now. That'd be
That's a whole other issue.
I'm just saying that I agree with John that what we're actually saying is that the people who live abroad, we are so diluted that we don't have any power. For example, if I were French and living abroad, the French who live abroad have one representative. I mean, just one, but they have one representative.
Hey, yeah.
Who just takes care of all the French living abroad.
Right, but it's even more than that. They have representatives around the world that represent French expats, and they have a voice at the National Assembly.
And so
they have a voice.
And so, if you come outside of the U.S. system and you look at what we got, is that there's no one who has a vested interest in protecting us or listening to us or fighting for us, because there's not enough of us to make a difference in whether they get elected or not.
But Kathleen, maybe I ask you this question, okay?
Yes.
I actually ask everybody this question. All right. Part of the problem is the inability to get Americans abroad to rally around the only issue that matters, right? Which is, getting rid of severing citizenship from tax residency. Why is that so hard, and what could be done to actually do that? Okay, now I want to just say one more thing, and I'm very interested in your answer, okay? I sort of tried to create this informal organization called very strong word group, called US Voters Abroad, to get people to consider, if they're going to vote, how they might vote in a way that would best further, the interest in getting this thing solved, right? But I mean, I perceive, other than complaining about this, very little interest or commitment on the part of Americans abroad to solve this problem. And I actually do believe that, given the numbers and the ability to make noise on this, I think they probably could make a difference if they came together as a group and stopped trying to think about channeling, their efforts through things like Democrats abroad, or something like that, right? Which is, seems to spend a lot of time out there, trying to get votes. So my question to you, and to Keith and Anthony, is what, if anything, can be done to get people, A, to understand that the issue is not their problem, but the problem, that is citizenship taxation, and how to bring them together to say enough is enough already.
I think, personally, in my opinion, I saw a couple of initiatives which were, let's just all get ourselves together, and we need to have someone who will negotiate directly with the IRS about our situation. Because the IRS is also experiencing pain around this issue.
Oh,
and to come up with the IRS, okay, all right, so how are we going to work this out so that it's not, you know, uncomfortable for you and uncomfortable for us? Because the IRS does have that leeway of deciding the law is A, and how do we apply it?
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The
And
IRS has a ton of leeway. You're right.
And I think that would be the best strategies. We all pool ourselves together as US residents abroad having to pay tax, and collectively go and say, okay, we just want to sit down with you guys, and how are we going to work this out so that it's not such a nightmare for us and for you?
I think that's a good idea. The question is how to achieve that. And I would be right now willing to propose you as the lead negotiator, Kathleen. Okay.
Oh, I'm horrible with negotiation.
All right. I second that.
I think you're very articulate on this. I think you bring the right amount of passion and common sense. As long as you repeat, okay, that your French husband was not intended to be a foreign trust. All right, you know, when you get over there. But seriously,
and that they take away the word alien, because if you want to piss off people around the world,
I know, right?
That's
well, you know, there are people who just believe they're married to an alien, regardless of the IRS characterization. I don't know. I think it may be contextual, but you know, this is really the problem is, and this is why, like, I don't like to use the word blame, because I know how hard this is, but I really have evolved to the view that the problem is right there when people look in the mirror every morning. You know, their tacit acquiescence in this garbage. You know, they're happy to be called tax cheats, basically, which is, without a doubt, the whole U.S. Internal Revenue Code is premised on the punishment of anything foreign. You see the word foreign in the Internal Revenue Code, I can almost guarantee you're going to find a $10,000 penalty within the next 3 or 4 words. And I also guarantee you it's the only part of the statute that anybody can understand, right? So if it's foreign, you're going to get a $10,000 penalty, notwithstanding you don't have the vaguest idea how to comply. I mean, what could be better than that?
Well,
I do, yeah, and I would just say, I just want to explain. So I have a message up on my screen from Keith. He sent it from Democrats Abroad, and this is what I was looking at, and I was just insulted. Now, I'm not someone who is a fan of Roe versus Wade. I never was. And okay, so that's my position on it. But what this sends out, it's this email is for Democrats abroad, and there's only one issue they talk about in the radical reversal of Roe versus Wade, whatever that is. That's their political thing. But as if that is everyone in the world's top issue, that if you're living in another country, well, there's going to be abortion laws there that have probably always been more restrictive than the United States, by the way. Many countries have it outlawed.
Or not, but it doesn't really matter. They have their own laws.
No. I think the United States has one of the most generous, if we want to use that word, policies.
no, I live in Europe, so
No, I know. I wouldn't agree with that.
Right. I mean, the question.
But that's fine.
The point being is why
Europe, India, and China, so that makes most of the world have better ones than the United States.
Why would that be a top issue to a Democrat abroad? That's my question, because that's how they're writing this. I don't even think abortion is a top issue.
Well, I mean, so I just want to stop something, because in the United States, the whole thing about abortion has been, for like over 30 years, it has been such a hot button issue and such a thing. As I don't like talking about it with Americans, because it's been such a button issue. It really has. And fortunately, I haven't been in any sites. I've been living in the United States and having to deal with that on a regular basis. So I really don't want to have a conversation about that. Not with Americans. It's too hot button for you guys.
Right, but the but I think Anthony's point is that why is correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony, why is that the issue for Democrats abroad and nothing is brought up about Americans overseas issues?
Like they're actual issues. It's like, that's just like
Right.
no one's paying. I mean, I would be insulted just because you don't know me. That's what I would. I'm like, what? Well, you're ruining my life every which way. And I understand Roe versus Wade was overturned and it's now up to the states. So that's sort of the thing where I would just be offended to say, well, I'm just a cash cow for your pet cause here, it seems like.
Exactly.
Okay, so excuse me, once again, what you're talking about for me has nothing to do with our subject. I mean, you're asking my opinion.
No, I think the point, right.
It doesn't.
I guess my question is this, Kathleen, is just, did you see the tweet? How did you feel about, if you got something like that from Democrats abroad to say, hey, look, vote because Roe versus Wade? How would you feel about that? That's my question.
But I did it.
Yeah.
All right.
But here's my.
Go
ahead. I'm sorry. Here's my point: is just in the title, personal freedom. Why isn't anything acknowledged about the personal freedom of Americans abroad? Nothing is ever stated about personal freedom of Americans abroad, which is taken away.
I disagree that you do get communications from Democrats abroad about that. I get communications from Democrats abroad about that.
Well,
your question is
a very simple question, everybody. Does anybody think the Democrats abroad cares about Americans abroad?
There you go.
Yes or no?
Thank you.
I think, well, I cannot answer for Democrats abroad, which is a multi-country. I can answer for Democrats abroad in France. Okay. And Democrats abroad in France has a number of Americans who have been involved and active in how can we find some solution to FATCA, FBAR, and citizen-based taxation. There have been committees who have gone together to DC to talk to different people in Congress. And this is also where I come back to the fact that talking to people in Congress at election time, you're quite likely to be listened to. And talking to them at another time, you're not high on their agenda. You're just not.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think that's what we have here. We just.
Kathleen, I got a question for you. Has it ever occurred to you you might be better off not being a U.S. citizen?
I mean, being a U.S. citizen from the point of view of taxations and economics, finances, it's complicated anytime you try and do something with money. It's horrendously complicated. And it's really very funny that my mother, who is 89 years old, actually said to me, she said, if it's going to cost you financially and your financial security, I would accept that you renounce. And I was really pleased that my mother gave me that. Yeah. Because she says, I cannot. In the beginning, the people in my family, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, when I told them what taxation was like being in an American abroad, they did not believe me. They thought I was lying. They thought I'd had too much to drink, whatever. So when I sent them the information about it, they're going, no, it's not. I mean, seriously? I mean, I have people in my family who, I told them this is what for FBARs, you have to, the name of the bank, the address of the bank. And they're like, I'd never fill that out. I said, yeah, well, I have to fill that out. I could lose my French bank account because the French banks don't want to lose there in the United States. So they have found a way to grab by the short and curlies the French bank so that they put pressure on me. So I could lose my French bank account if I don't fill in all the information. So there are all these people in my family, aunts, uncles, cousins, and my mother who said, we can understand that you wouldn't want to deal with this. And we can understand and accept that you might have to apply for a visa to come to visit us, and somebody in the family will have to guarantee that I have a place to stay and enough money and enough food to come and visit the United States, and they will do that. They'll vouch for me. They'll get me in the country.
That's nice of them.
You know, an interesting thing about the renunciation that I realized a couple of weeks ago, it's quite interesting, is that those who renounce U.S. citizenship and have strong feelings about not getting these COVID vaccines may have trouble getting into the U.S.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a dimension of it that has become apparent, or at least flying into the United States. So this is another dimension.
Well, I see that.
You have people who have renounced their U.S. citizenship in France and who have wanted to get a visa to go to the United States and who have been told informally and orally, if you wanted to go to the United States, why did you renounce your U.S. citizenship, and have found it a very long and difficult process to get a visa to go.
Well, okay, so
that's called blackmail.
Yeah.
Well, it's called U.S.ness is what it's called.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, may I ask? You clearly you're clearly about this, and you're clearly justifiably very bothered by this. I mean, would it be out of line for me to ask you if you have considered renunciation?
Yeah, I seriously thought about it, talked to my mom about it, and got my mother's blessing to do it.
But you were serious. I mean, I understand you had the conversation, but beyond that, I mean, you're serious.
But you couldn't, for 2 years, you couldn't do it because US Embassy is closed because of COVID. It wasn't even a possibility.
Yeah. There's a pent up demand right now. We're getting a lot of calls from people who are they've been thinking about it for a while, and they're like, you know what? That's it. We're done. We're going.
It wasn't possible.
Now it's starting to become possible.
Now it's starting again. Yeah.
And I'm getting quite a few calls myself about people contemplating that.
They've been looking at this, watching, alerting, of waiting for something to get better, and it only.
And as I said, and having made the decision to go the other thing and open up an American company, I said, Jesus, excuse me. And then you get this, then you start getting another catch-22 to open up a bank account.
Yeah.
The Bank of America does not want to open an international bank account for me because I filed FATCA.
Somehow this conversation reminds me of that old saying, to whom much has been given, much is expected. Don't you think, Kathleen, that having been given the gift of American citizenship, doesn't it justify all these hardships?
Oh, I thought you were going to say given the gift of having lived outside the United States.
Well, actually,
that is a gift. That is a gift.
That is interesting because, nobody's quite said it, but I think it's an indisputable fact, no matter what anybody thinks about the language, that these things have come together to create a United States that is effectively a fiscal prison.
And that once upon a time, you had people from a number of countries like Egypt, China, who would go to the United States and set up house for a year to have a baby born in the United States, to have a baby who would have a U.S. citizenship and agree, and a passport, so that,
Don't do that. Don't do that.
No, that's child abuse. That's child abuse.
Yeah, that's child abuse. Yeah.
Well, you know what I recommend to people now, particularly American residents, is to have their babies in Mexico. Okay, that way you're giving the child the gift of dual citizenship birth, all right, and the possibility, therefore, of avoiding the exit tax down the road. I mean, I'm serious. There is no group of people that is more in need of a second citizenship than Americans because of this. Because,
Agreed.
America is one of the few countries that presumptively creates hurdles to leaving the country. Okay. Yeah. I mean, think of it.
I mean, countries like Switzerland. I mean, Switzerland, you're just always Swiss. You just are. You don't lose it. The United States has all these things about how you keep your citizenship.
Well, in the 67 Aphorium case, and this I think might be worth an interesting podcast sometime, right? The decision very clearly said that Congress cannot do things that result in the forcible destruction of U.S. citizenship, and I think that these things do. Forcible destruction.
Oh yeah, totally. We're out of time here, and I do want to conclude. But John and Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes,
thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
So you guys are okay that independent of political beliefs, we're looking at an infrastructure that has found a way to blackmail the world, to blackmail its own citizens.
There you
Bingo.
go. Wow,
Bingo.
I thought we disagreed politically, but I think, there we go. There we go. We are on the same page.
Actually,
on the
it has
same
nothing to do with politics. It really has
Yeah.
nothing to do with
Yeah, it
politics.
doesn't. No, it's a smokescreen. The politics is a smokescreen to get us distracted, to ignore that very fundamental truth right there.
You know,
You just said it.
Citizens equally.
And that they found a way to get the world banking system to enforce it.
Amazing, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, FATCA, citizenship taxation, let's just look at citizenship taxation, is a 24/7 sanction on the rest of the world. I hate to put it to you this way, Kathleen, but you are a threat to France just by being there because you represent base erosion in their economy. All right. And frankly, I think this is going to get, I don't mean personally, but I mean the U.S. citizen. I think this is going to get to the point where, first, countries will not accept immigration from the United States. And if that doesn't work, they may eventually be required to deport them.
Yeah.
Unless
Wow.
they renounce.
Right.
Well, you can't renounce if the U.S. Embassy doesn't give you the option.
Right.
All right. Well, we are out of time, but I mean that this time.
Out of time.
Kathleen, thank you so much. Awesome podcast. As you see, we have a lot. We have a lot of great different. We have a lot of voices, a lot of opinions here, and hopefully that we all see we might disagree about this or that, but the big issue is the fiscal prison that has set up, and that prison is real. That is real.
It is real. And it is real even when you try and go back to the U.S. side.
Even better. All
Eh,
right. Amazing.
Even when you try and go back to the
Even
U.S.
when.
side, they say, we're waiting for you.
It's amazing. The most threatening question in the 21st century to somebody outside the United States is, are you or have you ever been an American citizen? Which is the reason.
No, you don't even have to be a U.S. citizen. If you were born in the United States and you're not a citizen, you're still under the code.
That's right. Were you born in the United States? That's right. My God, makes you toxic.
That's right.
Oh my God, what a conversation.
All right, fantastic. All right, guys, we got to go. Join us next time, John. Maybe we'll talk about because I think this would be a excellent follow-up to this, because we've clearly just
a foreign.
We have.
You know what a foreign did? Bastard voted in a foreign election.
Oh.
Can you imagine that?
Oh, how dare you?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be talking about that next time.
Offenses against the United States is long.
Well, I'll come back next time you guys talking about surviving being an American.
Right, we'll follow up with you. Maybe in a year. We'll just follow up. We're not going to wait 2 years. We'll follow up with you in a year. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Check in with us. Check in.
Good luck, Kathleen.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye.